The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. We just had a very, very prominent, I would say, scandal regarding college admissions. And we talked about this last week. Rich people and some celebrities paying to get their kids into colleges as athletes for sports that they don't even play, or based on faulty test results or fake test results, I think would be a better way to say it. And in the midst of all this and the exploding cost of college and all of the other problems that we're seeing within the world of education, the Trump administration is doing something that would just make the problem even worse. The White House is now proposing changes to higher education laws, which would make it an even bigger gap between the access to college that people who are born into wealthy families have versus people who are born into less wealthy families. Trump and Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, who knows nothing about education and has no business being Education Secretary, announced that what they want Congress to do is cap the amounts that students and families can borrow for post-secondary schooling. Now, this is really complex because, how do I even explain this? One of the problems that we have in the world of higher education is that students are coming out of college with insane amounts of debt, amounts that you can't realistically expect to pay off in any kind of sensible way, based on the salaries that one would expect to earn in those fields. So you can rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt by the time you're all said and done for a, I don't even know, I don't want to like come up with a bad example, but for a social work degree, right? And then you might be working in, Georgia in social work, and you're not going to make a salary that's going to allow you to pay that off in any sensible way. So one isolated problem is it's really easy to rack up crazy amounts of debt that is totally disproportionate to how much you would expect to earn. So at face value, you might think it's good. It's good that the government is going to cap how much money people are able to borrow. The problem is that this does nothing to deal with the astronomical cost of college, which is in the opposite of a free fall. It's rising like a helium balloon, or I don't know what analogy or metaphor you want to use. So if you just make it harder to get a loan, or to get a loan in the amount that you need to go to a certain program, but you don't deal with the accessibility of the cost of that program, in practice, yes, you will save some people from college debt that they can't pay off, but what you will actually do is limit people's ability to even go to college and get a degree, which is going to further set them back. And it is going to continue to widen the gap in terms of college degree holders versus non-college degree holders on the basis of economic lines, which is not what we want to be doing. So this is, in a totally isolated way, I don't disagree with trying to limit the size of loans that people are getting. But if you just kind of drop into the system we have from above and say, we're not going to deal with any of these other issues other than making it more difficult to run up huge debt, you're only going to make the problem worse in the long run. You are going to perpetuate and kind of create or further the vicious cycle of privilege leading to education, leading to good paying jobs, leading to people who have kids that are in those same positions. And meanwhile, you have this kind of like underclass that's developed, which we've been talking about on the program, in areas beyond just education. So I don't even want to get into the analysis of whether I think Trump and Betsy DeVos are doing this with the right intentions or with the wrong intentions. It actually doesn't even matter in practice. But yet another proposal that will have the actual impact, the pragmatic reality is it will further the divide, the growing divide that includes access to education. Let's talk about a story out of Florida. You might remember that in the 2018 midterms, one of the ballot initiatives that passed, that was a really good thing, was Florida voted to restore voting rights to some felons who have completed their sentences and allow them to once again vote, which is a really, really great thing because it just makes sense. It's the right thing to do, aside from any political strategy argument that you might be able to make. There is now a bill that has been advanced by Florida legislators yesterday, which is expected to limit the number of former felons who can vote, partially by requiring them to pay back all court fees and fines before they can register. So the referendum or the ballot initiative, as passed in Florida, did not require paying back extraneous fees and court costs that linger from one's conviction. And of course, many of those are not payable by these former felons who are already hamstrung or handicapped in their ability to get jobs as a result of being former felons. What Republicans in Florida are now trying to do is to say, okay, fine, the referendum ballot, the ballot question, the ballot initiative, I don't know exactly what I should be calling it, says you can register to vote. But from a practical perspective, from an administrative perspective, we're only going to allow you to do that once you pay off those fines and fees. And of course, it's a barrier that will effectively, that was a weird split screen there. It's a barrier that will effectively guarantee that a lot of these felons who by statute have a right to start voting again, former felons, will simply not be able to do it. And this was an initiative that passed with heavy support in Florida. 65% of Floridians said, yes, we should do this. We should amend the state's constitution to allow former felons to start voting again. Anytime in anything right now, you can get 2/3 agreement, given the polarized nature of our country and our politics. That's a massive win. That's a huge, huge win, 65%. The only requirements were parole must be completed, probation must be completed. Obviously, you must be out of jail or prison as a given. Now they are putting in additional restrictions, and it's similar to voter ID. At face value, voter ID, you just get an ID to vote, and the ID is free. Well, when you consider that to get the ID, you need documents that aren't free, and depending on where you live or how much money you make or what type of a job you have, it may be difficult or complicated to actually gather those documents and then to get to where you need to get in order to get that ID. You understand that something that seems innocuous actually has a massive impact, and it's a disproportionate impact on the basis of class, on the basis of race, and even arguably on the basis of politics in many states. That's what you're seeing here. And the practicality of this is that it will prevent a lot of people who should have their voting rights restored based on the law will not, because of their inability to pay court costs, which, by the way, are outrageous and inflated to begin with. So we'll hope that this does not become the law, although I hate to say it, it seems as though it is on the fast track in that direction. I'm guessing that some people in our audience were very young when the 2002 DC sniper shooting spree took place. And this is back in the news now because the Supreme Court agreed a couple of days ago to take up a case that concerns Lee Boyd Malvo, who was convicted for his role in that DC sniper case. Currently, Malvo is serving life without parole. But a lower court has ruled that he must be resentenced because he was only 17 years old when the crimes were committed. He's now 34 years old. He was one of 2 people convicted in those sniper attacks, which took place almost 17 years ago in Maryland, Virginia, and DC. 10 people were killed. His partner in the shootings, John Allen Muhammad, was already executed for his part in the spree. This is a detail where if you're in our audience and you remember the DC sniper shooting, this was controversial at the time because Malvo was only 17, and it was not unrealistic to believe that he was significantly under the sort of influence, not under the influence in terms of alcohol, but under the ideological influence of John Allen Muhammad in his participation in the sniper attacks. He was legally not an adult, although, of course, there are 17-year-olds, generally speaking, do know right from wrong. And it was controversial at the time. And now a lower court has said he's got to be resentenced because of his age at the time. And the Supreme Court is going to hear it. And I'm very interested genuinely in seeing what comes from this. Another interesting detail is that in one of his trials in Virginia, Malvo used an insanity defense, saying he had been brainwashed by Muhammad into a state that we would consider insane in that you don't understand the consequences of your action. Another sort of fact from the case is that originally it was claimed that, Malvo claimed to be the trigger man in all of the shootings, meaning the one who actually fired the gun, but later said Muhammad was the shooter in all but the very last one. That was also a source of controversy during the case in conjunction with his age and the insanity defense. So do I think that this is the right decision? Probably. It probably is, taking everything into consideration. Do I think that Malvo bears no responsibility whatsoever, or that he should have served no prison sentence at all? No, based on the information I have, that's not my position. But it does seem as though the way the sentencing was carried out was not done in consideration of all the known facts. And on that basis, a resentencing is probably correct. He's now 34 years old, and we will follow that in the Supreme Court. If you believe that Malvo was sentenced in a completely proper way, based on everything we knew, his age, the insanity plea, the changing testimony, and everything else, let me know. I'd be curious to hear from you and curious to hear why you think that that sentencing was appropriate for someone who was, again, at the time of the crimes, 17 years old. We'll follow up on it. We'll follow up about it once the Supreme Court actually takes the case and hears the case. That's it for today. New show, new bonus show tomorrow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.